So sorry about that. My internet connection just dropped out. Let me start again. So today I want to talk about getting IELTS Band 8. I haven't put IELTS Band 9 because it's very rarely given. And I think if you wanted to try and get a Band 9, it would take a very long time. So let's focus on getting Band 8. And even if you don't need or want to get Band 8, it's good to set your sights a little higher than the band you need so you can be sure that you get what you want. And during this live today, I'm going to introduce a few of my students that I've worked with who achieved Band 8 and have now moved on and are getting on with their courses or their new careers or whatever it is. So I'm going to give you 5 things that you need to do if you want to get Band 8. And before I do that, I want to just introduce you to a student I worked with a few years ago called Sharifa. Now, she was from Malaysia and she was a child psychologist and looking to do a master's degree in Australia. And when I met her, she was getting 6.5. She'd just taken the exam, I think, and got 6.5 in everything except the writing. And we were to work on her writing to get it to 6.5. I suggested to her that she might want to try and move everything to higher than 6.5 so that she could be absolutely certain of the 6.5 in the exam. So in fact, we worked on all parts of the course. And very quickly, her reading and listening got to 8, 8.5, and her speaking was also around 8. And her writing took a bit longer, but eventually it got to 7, which was the minimum that she needed in order to get the place on the Masters. And she took the exam and she came out overall with an 8.5, which was much higher than she needed. Anyway, she went off to do her Masters, and once she was in Australia, she wrote to me and told me that had she just scraped her 6.5, she would probably have struggled on the Masters course. So she was absolutely delighted that she'd managed to get a much higher score and a much better level of English. So that's a good story for why it's important to try and go above the band that you want and not just try and scrape through. Okay, so let me come to the 5 things that you should be doing in order to get an 8 in your exam. Hello, Namaya. Hello, Mohammed Shafiq. Nice to see you. I think we've lost the other student, unfortunately, because my connection dropped in the middle. Okay, let's start with the first thing that I think you should be doing, and that is to have a proper study plan. This means that you need to organize your time so that every day, preferably, you're doing something. Now, that doesn't mean 5-6 hours. I've met students that are studying 5 hours a day and they're tired, they're frustrated, they don't seem to make progress. It's just too much. You don't need that much study. Little and often, but don't make it random. Don't just wake up and say, what am I going to do today? Make sure you've got a plan. So maybe today you might decide to do some reading practice and then a little bit of writing, perhaps just analyze a question, something small like that. And then tomorrow you might decide to do a bit of listening practice and then look at the introduction for your writing. So make sure that you're doing little and often, but you have a proper plan and write down that plan. You know, make sure it's done properly. I have a plan that I can give you. I think, in fact, it's in the group under the files. So if you look there, you can probably find it. And that plan will help you to move your language level systematically. Because when we teach English, we usually have a progression from elementary to intermediate to upper intermediate to advanced. And it goes step by step. So if you don't have a plan, then you're going to be like a headless chicken running around trying to find things to do. So have a plan, don't be random. Just like Sharifa, we had a plan together and she went from 6.5 to 8.5 in about, I think it was 9 months in total. And, you know, we worked systematically. Okay, number 2, monitor your progress. So don't just study today and then forget about it. Look at what was good. What did you achieve? What things do you still need to work on more? And use the mistakes you make. If you do a reading and you make some mistakes, use those mistakes to learn from them, to improve the next time. So don't just do your work and put it away. And I want now to talk about another student of mine who also got 8.5, and that was quite recently. It was just about 6 months ago. And when I sent back the results of any of the work he did, so he would send me his reading, his listening, everything, I would check it, send it back, and then he would go over everything. So every time there was a mistake, he would go over it, he would figure out why he got it wrong. If he didn't know, he would, in our next lesson, we would discuss it together. So by going over everything, he again was able to improve everything up to a very high band, and he got 9 in his reading, and he got really high scores, 7.5 in everything else, and an 8, I think, too, and his overall score was 8.5. But by being very analytical in the way he approached the work, he was able to keep improving and improving until he got this 8.5 score in the exam, which was quite phenomenal. Okay, number 2. Number 3, try to work with other people, because doing it alone will take a long time. You need to bounce things off others. Language is about communication. We need to speak to people. We need to listen to people. We need to write for people to read. And we need to read what people have written. So the very quickest way and best way to improve all your skills is to work with others. Now, these can be friends. They can be other students, join a class. They can be teachers like myself. And you're welcome anytime to ask questions in the group, or, you know, post anything that you found useful so that other people can have advantage from that. But work with others. And I want to introduce you to a student of mine called Sophia, whom I worked with quite a long time ago. Now, she was a German student. If you look on my YouTube channel, there is actually an interview I did with her. But she was a doctor and she wanted to work in New Zealand. And she and I worked together. She actually came to stay with me here, because I do have students who come and stay here with me. And that's my classroom you can see behind. And she came for a week and we worked together. And then we continued to work online up to her exam, which I think was a month after. And during the time we were working together, I introduced her to some of the other groups, the other students that I was working with, and they formed a group. They formed a group at that time on Skype, but you could easily do it on Messenger or WhatsApp. And these students met 2-3 times a week. And they practiced everything. So they practiced the speaking, but they also looked at reading together and writing together. And she took her exam and she got 7.5s and 8 in everything. And so did the other students. There were 5 of them in the group, and they all achieved a high band. They all got at least 7.5 or 8 in the exam. And when I spoke to them after they got their results, one of the things they said to me was that, as well as working with me, which gave them the technical expertise, if you like, they found working together as a group helped them tremendously to practice, to improve, and to boost their scores. So working with other people is really important, and I urge you all to do it. Okay, number 4. don't just do IELTS practice from the Cambridge books or online. You also need to address other aspects of English, such as vocabulary, such as grammar. It's also a good idea to do listening and reading outside of the IELTS books, because that way you will get a wider range of vocabulary and a wider range of grammar structures. So make sure that your grammar is sound. Make sure you've got a good range of vocabulary and synonyms for common words. So don't restrict yourself to just the IELTS preparation and practice. It's quite narrow. And believe you me, if your English is good, the better your English, in fact, the easier it will be to get a higher score. And now I want to tell you about another student called Saif. And Saif was from Iraq and studying to do an MSc. And we, again, were working together. We were working on my IELTS Unlimited course, which is a 3-month course covering all aspects of IELTS. And we also included in that course a lot of grammar. So every time there was a problem in the writing with a grammar aspect, he would ask me for some grammar exercises, and I provided these and we went through them. I also provided some extra vocabulary exercises. And so through doing those exercises, all aspects of his IELTS preparation improved tremendously. So if you stick with just IELTS, you're in quite a narrow area. So if you want to get Band 8, you need to widen your range, and therefore listen to things, listen to podcasts, listen to news programs, listen to even radio programs are good. Watch movies, that's good, but remember a lot is visual. So widen your exposure to English. Don't just stick with IELTS. So the wider your range of English, the wider your vocabulary and grammar, the easier the exam will be, and the easier it will be to get a good score. Okay, so that's number 4. And finally, number 5. Keep practicing and developing. Keep pushing. So I want to remind you about Sharifa. She was quite happy just to scrape a 6.5. That's what she wanted. But as we started to work, she saw the potential of getting a much higher score. And because her writing had still not reached the level, then she was able to get that higher score in the other parts of the exam, with the result that eventually she got 8.5, which made her life a whole lot easier when she finally got to Australia. So don't settle for a low score. Try and boost your English as much as you can, and this means you may get a much higher score, which will give you more choice. So it could be that once you get the higher score, then there are more opportunities open to you. The second thing is that if you get a higher score, that will reflect in your language ability. So when you move to Canada, Australia, or the UK, or even into a new job where you need to use English, you will find it's a whole lot easier to do that if you have a high score. So it's worth trying to get the highest score that you can. But you have to work at it. Now, the last student I want to tell you about is a student called Eman. And Eman and I worked together over quite a long period, in fact, because she wanted to make sure that her English level was really, really good. She wanted to come and work as a doctor in the UK. And she needed for that 7.5, and she was getting 6.5. So we worked on the IELTS, and then she stopped and said, I feel that I'm lacking in English. So she actually stopped her IELTS for a few months, and she went off and joined an advanced English language, general English language course, and she spent some time just focusing on English language and general English. And then once she had done well with that and she felt that she could speak better, listen better, read better, write better, she came back to me and we then continued with the IELTS. And there was a huge difference. That made a huge difference. So she then went on and she, in the end, actually, she didn't take the IELTS, she took the OET and she got a very high score and she's now working as a doctor in a hospital here in the UK. So those are all students that I've worked with in the last few years. And they were all students who got those high scores of 8 and 8.5. And they did it by, number one, having a proper study plan. Number two, monitoring their progress and learning from all of their mistakes. They left nothing to chance. Number three, they worked with me. They also worked with other students and other people. Number four, they focused on their English language as much as they focused on their IELTS preparation, and that gave them the opportunity to get a higher score more easily. And number five, they kept developing. So every time they did a reading, they found out why they'd made the mistakes. And so through that process, the mistakes became fewer and fewer. The same with the listening and the writing and the speaking. So they kept pushing and pushing their language level until it got to the level where they could go into the exam and easily achieve a band 8. Okay, so that's how you do it. And let me see if there are any questions particularly. David, good question. It is very, very difficult to do that by yourself. So if you want to know if a student has achieved a band 7, if you're a teacher, then you should be able to do that by using the band descriptors. I kind of know because I've been doing this for over 25 years and also I was an examiner. So when I'm working with a student, I know when they've got to 7 and then I try and push them a little bit further so they can be sure of the 7 in the exam. But the best test is the band descriptors. And I would say also with the writing that if you want a band 7, remember you've got to have as many sentences as possible without mistakes, error-free sentences. And just by looking at band 7 pieces in the Cambridge books and that examiners have marked that are available online as well, I would say that a band 7 will only have maybe between 7 and 10 mistakes, and a band 8 will probably only have about 4 or 5, something like that. So if all the sentences are error-free except for about 7 or 8 of them, then it's likely to get a band 7, so long as the writing is good, they've answered the question and all of the other things in the descriptors. If it's an 8, it's going to have very few mistakes indeed, maybe only about 3 or 4. Okay, how can you increase vocabulary to reach band 7? Right, 2 things I would say would help with that. Number 1, look at your verbs and try to replace any simple verb like can, have, is. Not all of them, because you do need to use those simple verbs sometimes, but try to change the others into more sophisticated vocabulary. Okay, that's one thing you can do. And then the second thing you can do is to make sure you've got lots of synonyms for simple words that you might have to use. Like if it's about children, have a lot of synonyms for children and child. If it's about, let me think, if it's a task 1, you need lots of synonyms for words like increase, decrease. You need to do that. You also need to have a lot of different types of sentence structure. So I notice quite often when students are getting 6.5, although their vocabulary might be, although their vocabulary might be good and might be quite wide, there might be a lot of repetition of the same sentence structures, like there is, there are, comes too often. And you need to change that and use more noun phrases, use more gerunds, use more present participles, use conditionals. So a good range of different types of sentence structure is really important. Okay, I hope that answers those few questions. Right, so before I finish, just to remind you that we're trying to get this group up to 5,000, and then I'm going to do some free training. And I also want to remind you about my IELTS Champions Club, which is a club. You subscribe to it, and I do training in that club. And if we can get to the 5,000 and do the free training, then I'm going to look at making a really good offer on entry to the Champions Club. In the Champions Club, you get all the things that I've talked about today. You get a plan to work from. You get people to interact with and practice with. You get English language as well as IELTS. So if there are grammar things that we will look at, there's vocabulary things that we will look at. You get training with me. Once a month we have one big training, and every week I do a live which addresses some aspect of IELTS. Sometimes I go through reading, sometimes I'll go through somebody's writing. You'll get feedback on your writing too. So all of those things are contained in the Champions Club. So let's get this group up to 5,000, then I can do the free training, and then I hope all of you will jump into the Champions Club. And I want to try and get this done around the beginning of 2023, so that it's a good way for all of you to start the new year. Okay, thank you for coming along. Thank you for your questions. They're very good and very helpful. And I'll see you next Thursday in our next IELTS Live Thursday. Have a great weekend and lots of happy study. Okay, bye everybody.